당도 magazine da liu yi ba de la ni di ba sha be liu sen ne dang ju sha be liu sen ne da di ba sha de nian bo tu shu ko ne sha ho res da nian bo tu shu ko ne sha se de dang bo ding yu do ba ne sang ye da zhen ju sen ba pa pa de ge ding yu do mo yo so de le ya ne de ba da yi ji dan de ba zhe ju de che be to ne de ne rang ge nga re che be ge di ba da so so ge je gang zhen ba da man zhen be ne nian ba chi di ba de ge na di bi de ge gyun chi da de ta je ba de ji mi nu sen bi ge ba re je de ne da di ren an je ge ya an sang ye da zhe ju sen be ge dun le ya wang sum do an je ge de ne di ba de sha gi sen be ge da je ge do chen ne dun ba ge je a ju ge ge ju gang hong zhu ba na da ni be do do chen ne cha go res an de je le ya an de sha be je le ya mo ba na da qin ji ne da de ni ge di be cha wa sa sa ge ji ge me sen be ge dum sem ge je du chen di ba sha go re sa ji ga da xin ye ma da zo ru shi da de de ne an ji yin bo du shi go ne sha ba de di ba ji dan ge wei ja wa ka che ba ne di ba sha go de ne ya da yin bo du shi go ne sha ba de sha ba yin na an ji ge sha ye ge du chi shi cha go re sa ji ga zu ge da ma zo le dang bo wa zo la du xin ne do chin chike somaro an tene za di go nga zo kisin ta di ba sha pe liu dor ju na ta do chin ne chu sim baro.
Good evening. So last week we concluded looking at the second chapter of the Engaging in Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the chapter on confession. And confession or purification is a process by which one purifies past misdeeds through the accumulating of opposing, powerful, virtuous minds. So for purification to be powerful, it should be conjoined or performed with all four opponent powers. So whilst these can be practiced in any order, the first could be the power of reliance, where one turns to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas with a mind of deep and sincere faith, and imagines being in their very presence. And in their very presence, this is the first opponent power, the power of reliance. In their very presence, one recalls one's past misdeeds, both those that one can recall having done in this life, as well as those from past lives that one imagines one would have done. This is the second opponent power, the power of regret, whereby one imagines oneself saying explicit or confessing explicitly to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The third opponent power, that of the antidote, this refers to any virtuous activity. So the activity could be something physical, such as prostrations, could be something verbal, such as recitations, and certainly it can be mental, such as engaging in meditation. And then finally is the power of restraint, where one promises to restrain from repeating such non-virtuous behavior. So these four opponent powers comprise the practice of purification, which is the dominant part of the second chapter, that of purification. So for us as beginners, it's important to employ these or make use of these four opponent powers, because in general, it certainly is the case that any virtuous activity, because it strengthens our wholesome minds, thereby purifies. It weakens the contrary, unwholesome minds. But for our accumulation to be particularly powerful, we should rely on these four opponent powers.
di kwar sungor wa di ne za da di na liu di na sung yu ba za da nga ju thapa chim be chue nyam le ga ha je be no kun lo zo wa cha ju sim yu kun ne la je thapa chim be chue nyam le je ho ra de pa chen tu ge nyam le di ge ne cha ju sim yu kun ne la je ho en za da di ga zo cha ju sim nyam su le na cha ju sim ge tha da cha ju sim ge da o mo sim ge ya da de ne je ju sim ge ya an cho ga di ge din da ma sungor wa di ne za da di liu de le ya. And the changes in so liu says
Tonight we'll start the third chapter, entitled Embracing Bodhicitta or Taking Hold of Bodhicitta, which culminates in making the commitment of a bodhisattva, the commitment to generating bodhicitta and becoming a Buddha for the sake of others. So that is the culmination of this third chapter. But the many verses prior to that are the completion of the seven limb prayer. Thus far, we have looked at three of the limbs, that of offerings and prostrations, offerings, and confession. Now we come to that of rejoicing, which will be followed by requesting for the wheel of Dharma to be turned, for one's spiritual teachers and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to remain in our world, and then for dedication. So those limbs will be presented, and thereafter one generates the commitments of a bodhisattva.
나 장주심 소야 될이야 장주심 송어야 될이야 안 소사 집장 구고레스 지상 소사 집장 세대 연락 준비고는 소사 집장이 녀래 지고 그래서 지상 내내 인자다 연락 준비고는 소사 집장이 녀래 양은 연락 숨조 차례다 차차와도 최고부와도 디버샤와도 조사래 나되는 마가려서네 인당보 지수이랑 자 제야지제 안에 지게 취유고로 소와 대바 되는 양알에 믿어봐 소와 대바 되네 안에 지게 겨워야 돼 내야라 어디시대 다된마 쉬야래 디나네 당은 뭐 지수이랑 세대 개월 지수이랑 제대 다 도시는 거래.
In order to actually generate bodhicitta, one needs to prepare one's mind. And this process that we have been going through and will continue with tonight is how to prepare one's mind. And the preparation of one's mind in order to take hold of the vows or the commitments of a bodhisattva is to reduce non-virtuous habitual tendencies and strengthen wholesome habitual tendencies. And this is done through the seven limb process, the seven limb prayer. So again, we've looked at the first three, and tonight we'll start with the fourth, that of rejoicing, which will then be followed by requesting the Dharma to be taught, the spiritual teachers to remain, and then dedication. So the purpose of the seven limbs, once again, the seven limb practice, is to prepare one's mind so that it is suitable for the actual generation of bodhicitta.
나 지수이랑기 아디마제 지델이야 아네 대등은 저기 지수이랑지에 대한 아주에 제 개와치마 하다미 고반 퇴비기 안에 개와다 니티고 하다미기다 제 디길이야 지수이랑지야 지금 거래 내내 지게 년뇌다 라제이 제주 토비에 탈비 고반 토비에 인규 개발에 지수이랑지야 직제 디되고 안에 탈비기 탈바들이야 탈비 고반들이야 지수이랑지야 되네 하나 저기 샘제 담지기 아까 소래 요모 디바 바샤데 제바 빵제 아니 최근 좀 원수도 탈을 침바 아니 상계 고반이야 안 지수이랑지야다 디 아니 자주sem바 파베기 강사다 디 냠는지 심발이야 지수이랑지야 디규 아니 야 초람다 졸람 자주셈 라 안지수이랑지야 돼 도시는 지수이랑지에 제 림바들다 도시는 숨으로 차거래.
This presentation includes rejoicing in three sets of causes. The set of causes that leads to rebirth in the higher realms, where beings can abide at least with some experience of temporary happiness. That's the first set. The second set are those causes that lead to the liberation from the suffering realms of samsara, the liberation of hearers and solitary realizers. That's a second set of causes that is to be rejoiced in. And the third are those causes that lead to the generation of bodhicitta, as well as the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds and imprints, and the attainment of full and complete enlightenment. So that's the third set of causes that one rejoices in.
지난 개와 차상리에 지수이라 임바 질라 조다 조 땅을 도 지dum되고 쉬잖아 기부 충의 남기림바 남기림바들이야 남기림바다 디기 제부 아는 원도 고바들 지수이라지야 기부 쟁기 안에 남기림바다 디 제부 안 타르베게 고바는 지수이라지야 기부 챔비게 남기림바 안에 자주스미 군나라베 파진르게 냠네 안데슬리안 지금 네 냠네 남 소람나 졸람 데슬리아 안제수이라지야다 디 제부 공발라테네 안에 파베 가사 자주스 파베 가사 디 냠네 안데 타르도 상예다 상예기규 근데 데슬리아는 어제수이라지야 돌드나 가수 조어르 디수리 지난다 개와 탐질리 지수이라지 오고로 있네.
So in general, when it comes to rejoicing, one rejoices in all virtue. But another way to express how it is divided here in this text would be to rejoice in the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, which results in rebirth in the happier realms. And secondly, rejoicing in the trainings which are shared with practitioners of intermediate capacity that leads to liberation from suffering. And thirdly, rejoicing in the trainings that are unique to practitioners of greatest capacity and their results. So this would be another way to present the way that one rejoices in this text. But in brief, one rejoices in all forms of virtue.
당보 지대라단 디네레 샘진 군지가 송기 동알랑알 수의 개화당 동알 쩐다 데르네라 가베지소 이랑모스.
The first verse, with delight I rejoice in the virtue that gives respite from the suffering experienced by all those beings in the lower realms and that enables those that suffer to abide in higher realms.
지자다 샘진 군지가 송기 동항아 수의 개화당 세디기 가를 지수이란 지에들라 당한 주기 네 하다 미유고방 토비게 탑람 개화들라 지수이란 지에데 순고래 지나다 돈의 님보들의 개화 침이 하다 미유고방 토비게 탑 남는 주 개화래야 네 지게 지수이란 지에데.
For us in English, look at the second and third line. In the virtue that gives respite from the suffering experienced by those beings in the lower realms, in the next line, and that enables those that suffer to abide in higher realms. So this is, in brief, what is being mentioned here in brief is that one is rejoicing in the virtue that leads to rebirth in the higher realms, rebirth as a human or as a god.
나 디스고르다 심진 군지의 안송기 동알nga 소어서 동알nga 소어서 그래. 지나 다 심정 군지 안송기 동알nga 소라비 심전 참마 단 안송을 파지제 냐와다 이다다 dunre도 진데들이야 동아바도 매번 용고에 차고로 받아. 지나 심정 군지 안송기 동아서 동아 용고에 차고래. 지나 동아들이야 강하다 동아시우 주여버려. 지나 다 되는마 지게 델레 타르체 하다 미고방 토바네 네 동아디게 뇨 먹어서 배지게 회시시로 지데 직뱅 동아 뇨마 나송의 동아딜레 타르지네 아니 회시시다 디기 중고로 봐 제자다 먼저 하다 미고방디 나송의 동아레 타네 아니 나소에게 내려오지 어디 디레스 거다네 거두시네 삼다도 나송기 동아시드 아세네 나수에 라디 샘정군이 나수에 동할 나수라도 지사다 나수라기나 데지게 동아바도 매반요 강아시우 셔바체 델레 타르체네 하다 미고방 토바이나 제와실렘바이나 디제와디 다 동아뇨 나수에 동아뇨 먹어체 나수 동알라 탈베게다 디기지 용거로 와서 그래 요래서 그러다.
Here rejoicing is in the virtue that leads to rebirth in the higher realms, which means one is not therefore born in the low realms. So whilst even when one is born in the high realms as a human or god, one certainly still suffers, and we know this from our own lived experience. Compared to rebirth in the low realms, where suffering is immeasurable compared to what we have experienced, it is very clear that it's as if And from the perspective of a being in the lower realms, it's as if we in the higher realms have a liberation from suffering, although that is temporary and not an actual liberation by any measure. But the suffering in the lower realms is so frequent and so intense that from the perspective of the higher realms, it's as if the suffering is continuous. So therefore, it is worthwhile, or it's valid, to rejoice in the virtue that leads to rebirth, a rebirth that is not in the lower realms, but one that is actually in the higher realms.
Pedro jingan 저기 베네치 니마 차와 치모가 내가 갈래만 오지 내가 쉬우지 갈래 잡되면 갈래 쉬어로 받아 다 되네게 갈래 잡지되네 간삼질이야 안지 가서 직접 동사지 나로 좋아지네 안지 다 지뢰뢰 제대로 시동 되면은 된 대신 내가 갈래 잡아디 갈래 쉬어 받을래 다들 등에 뢰뢰 되도 아니 대랑라 지어로 받아 지가선 대시 내가 님의 사회길래 깔래자 강아들에 타르시네 파 직다데 르르지 되고로 와다 르르지니 지 요한자 당아서 내서 접시기로 왔다 내서 위에서로 와서 이제 르르지 되고라 기 강한 매바다 르시시 디기지어로 와다 디디기디나 나서 게 갑래 강아 깔래려가 막고 접지 내서 게 갑라 가지고 강아들에 타르신 디기 르르지 되고 준 거로 와디 나디네기 디기디세로 디디기디 당아서 하다 미고봐 땡디 토바데 지바래서 지사 냐위 갑라 냐와다 둔디 가서 나서미 텔야 동아 빠도 메바 뇽고데 텔레 타지 하다 미고봐 토요디 데네 동아 델레 타자 르시시 지용고래 디기 용고래서 지사디 나수에 네스 하다 미고봐디 나서가 동아 델레 타지 나세게비기 네로시에서 나수에 네스 나수에서
We can liken this to an experience you may well have had when laboring outside in the hot summer sun. And then it's time for a tea break, and you go inside and drink something cold, and you're out of the searing heat of the sun, and you're drinking something cool in the shade. Then the mind and the body are at ease. So this we can understand to that tea break being likened to a rebirth in the higher realms. From the intensity of the suffering of laboring in the heat, that then can be likened to an extensive rebirth, or a rebirth of long duration in the lower realms. So that's how we can relate to the illustration here. So respite we can understand as a relief, temporary relief from the intense suffering and the immensity of the time period of the suffering of rebirth in the lower realms.
디니게다 가수위네 가수의 등을 타지 디기 가수위네 가수 등을 뇨 먹어야 가수위네 디 라다미고 토야 디 라다미고 바래 지산 라다미고 바토 디텔이야 라다미 디기 뇨야 들어와다 가수 지산 디 가네스 용구레스네 규 안내지게 개화사 바다 규 안내지게 개화 라다미고 바토야 규 추림수야다 ane chigi jimbe nyamle da, suebe nyamle da, ane zonrige nyamle, denike molam tabege jikdu shine, gewa le dene andrugur was, chizan dil hada miyu kubang toye yu gewa saba di, gewa dile da, jisu iranchi gore. Hada miyu kubang toye ge, nga songe nele tar, nga sube ne, hada miyu kubang toye yu gewa dile ya samdaja, gewa di beya gore, sta denike hada miyu kubang toye gyudi beya gore, sambege samdaja di, 가서 사람이 미우고 토비기 유 아니 개발을 해서 일하고 하셔야죠.
So therefore, understand this rebirth in the high realms is considered should be experienced as being or likened to a brief relief in terms of the immensity of time and immensity of suffering of rebirth in the lower realms. So having attained such a rebirth has come about in dependence on causes, and those causes are virtuous causes. So in the virtuous causes that led to rebirth in the higher realms by ourselves and so many others, this is something worthy of rejoicing in. So here one rejoices in the various virtuous causes that have led to rebirth in the higher realms.
Onda Kewala Chiso Iran Sidin Chesa, Deniki Kewala Chiso Iran, Jehuri Sidi, some died, that those guns, some died, was some daje, that Jinga Songu Dungada, Nyawada, Ida said, the Nakanga didn't your recipe, Dungadi, some died, that Dunga Dil had a milk bottom, the Dunga di Yomo, what a bad Yahuri Sambiki, Dunga Dil Yomo, what the Gish to us, Chesa Ganga de Targu to us, Chesa did Taria did that. You can in the young work and tell how that you go to you can realize you that you give us a holiday, such a gawa, Jigge, Ladamigo want to be children, Lunga used nature to be children so yard, then Ladamigo want in to be tin delia, and the Seguetan, and the Jig Ponson of Yaki, the Jimbat, the Jimbanian, the Jimbat Nayade, and the Servo Combia. And Chig the Nigga gave the nigga Junior Palas of Kawa Saba, the Yungo, Chesada, the nigga Kawa to give Pemas Yaburedo, Chesa, the Nikawa Saba, and the Kawa Diri, Gengene, Naso Dunga Tarjin, Ladamigo, Top Tudua, Ladami, Della, Diki, Jiggy, Bear, was to Tudua, the Nezada, the nigga Kawa, the Bear, Oresha, some bigida, Dushin, some done. Gimsen, some da, Dushin, Kawa, some da, Kawa del Bear, Oresha, some big, some died that Kawala. When you go on to be you and the Gavala just around as a chagore. Shiba lo made that. That the Jin Dawani Kishida.
So here we are comparing, by comparing the suffering in the lower realms to that of the higher realms, one can readily rejoice or easily rejoice in the one's great fortune of oneself and others who are born in the higher realms. And being born in the higher realms has only come about in dependence on causes, and those causes are virtuous. So here one is encouraged not merely to rejoice in virtuous causes, but to call to mind those causes, such as, or namely, ethical restraint, generosity, patience. And here one can recall actual causes that one is engaged in and therefore can remember, or what one has observed in society, or can imagine. Because these causes of ethical restraint, generosity, and patience are the very causes that lead to rebirth in the higher realms.
That's it, Ladami go on the D Dendele, Digidele, and Jebudele, Jesuiran Cheda Sungorda. Dunga Genda, dear Nella, Gavichus Iramo, said again.
So in the English, in the second line, it starts with in the virtue. So that virtue, that refers to the causes. And then for us in the final line in English, enables those that suffer to abide in the higher realms. So their abiding in the higher realms is the result of the virtue that has been accumulated. So one rejoices in the causes that have led to such a result.
Gazam Jilla de Yamana Yankale Ruayaji, and Chick Togorachi, Gangale Murua, got dingy, Tigi, Pusun Soba dingy, the what Chaya Marvade, Yanja, Galeja Moel Maranja Jelia, Galeja Urua, on Diro. And Dina she, that Dumagenda, said dear Nela, said Lada Mi, go on Tobadi, dingy, Jidanga Sungu Dungala Taji, Digi Shiores, in a got dingy, the what you were the West Marias or Carson, Dumagenda, said, and Delia. Give Dunga, and it get that Dunga Yor, give Dunga Yor, Chavatushi Dunga Dunga Sumgi, Yedibare, Chesa, Dunga Jenda, said Dunga Dunga, you Dunga, Chavatushi Dunga Yores, Tisa, Dunga Denegi Yedi in the case or Dunga Jenda, dear Nela, said.
Just like with the illustration given a moment ago, when we are toiling out in the hot sun, and then we take a much needed break, and we're resting in the cool, maybe drinking something cold as well, then that break, as much as it is enjoyed, we know is temporary, and that more hardships await us. So that can then be likened to the understanding that rebirth in the higher realms, this can be seen from the perspective of those in the lower realms as being entirely pleasurable. But the temporary relief is very temporary, because even in the higher realms, one still experiences the threefold suffering of physical and mental pain, of transient happiness, and all-pervasive suffering. So even though we call the higher realms or the happier realms to be happy, it is only in comparison to the lower realms. There's still ongoing suffering in the happier migrations as well.
Anda denegi dunga da gyue dunga chaba du ji dunga ji yoba ina ya denegi yoba re de tingi deba de toyo mara ina dunga yoba dunga ina du gore ina ya da de ne ba so ngansung dunga ji le tar che ne an lu din de la lu gi de wa da an sem gi de wa digi de yoba de digi yung gor wa digi yor wa che san di pe ya gore sem pe da de ne ya ji digi de da lu mi lu de na lai da mi lu de na de la an digi yung wa de an 야고레 삼백에 as samdaya delta 대시 계획이 제보 안데 제일하다 미고 봐 톱디 된데라 디기 여바 디기 될이야 지수이라 시고래
This result of virtue, this rebirth in the high realms, this too is to be rejoiced in. So earlier I mentioned we are rejoicing in the causes that lead to the results of higher rebirth, and now in addition we should result in that higher rebirth, result in this happiness that of a higher rebirth, even though this is only temporary happiness, it's not lasting happiness. Nevertheless, we should rejoice in what has been attained and not deprecate it, or we should still consider it worthwhile. So we rejoice both in the causes that lead to higher realm rebirth, as well as the result of those causes, the attainment of higher realm rebirth.
And Gawe Jisu Irango said, see, the Gawe, Gawajin, Gawajin, Galana, Yin, Jesu Rasam, Sigurd, Gawe Jisu Iran said, is that the Nigala Chaya, Lada Miyoko to you, Gavatilia. Benesem Gawing and the Jesu Raja. The Negi Gudela in the Jebu, Lada Miyoko top, Lada Miyoko Vata, Lada Miyoko Delia, and the Digi, Lada Mi, Digi, Noa, Digi Delia, and the Yapore Sempik Gawi, Beapore Semba Gawiton, and Jesu Raja. Adus Jesu Raja Delta, but Jesu Ram was said, the Tamadi Nigalia Jaja.
And the Tibetan concludes with what we started with in the English, with delight I rejoice. So here one is rejoicing again, both in the causes that have been accumulated, that lead to rebirth in the higher realms, as well as in the attained result, that of rebirth in the higher realms.
Denigi Deva Yapure Sambarwa, Denigi Gewa Sabal, Denel Hada Mi Jibut, Hada Mi go want to go on to get Be Yapure Sada, Digi Hada Mi, Digi Yapuno, Yapure Sambaina, then Jesuira, Yapure Samdelia, Jig Sambaina, Jesuira Chagurwa.
From this line, with delight I rejoice, from this we should understand the experience of the mind of rejoicing is that it is a mind that delights, that takes pleasure in what is being rejoiced about. So therefore, it is a mind that is taking delight in this instance, the causes that lead to higher realm rebirth, as well as taking delight. The mind of rejoicing is a mind of delight in the results of those causes, higher realm rebirth. Oh.
The Jesuira said, some days in the Jesuira said, that the negative thing on Julia and you, Lada Miyoko want to be Julia, Jesuira, and D. Table, Lada Miyoko van Delia, and the Jesuira, Lada Miyoko van Delia, the Union de la Tigila, and the Yapores, and some died the water. The Donala, did some died the Dang Julia, Manju some died in Yamnichi to Kabla, the Ranki, and the Lada Miyoko want to you. Gusaba de la Chisuiranchea. Sosorang, Lada Miu Gopon, that the top to be Dinyo Gopon, top to Chia, Lemi, Java Lendio Bache, Dendelia, Mi Di Yongorwa, Delia Chisuiranchea, Rangla, Rangi, La Chisuiranchea. And Shengi, Rangle, Shenbe Gansagi me, when the Lada Miu Gopon, Toya, the Kawasaba de la Yapures, Chisuiranchea, Yapures, some Tai Yapures. And then they give me Shandai Gawa. Jubala dinner and Lada Mugo one top Dendelia and Digi Jitoya, Dendelia, Diki Yapura, some died Rangla, Rangi, you Lada Mugo to Yukevala Chisuirawa. The Jebo Rani, La Migo one, then top again, Toba, their topnet, Den Dedan, Dendelia, Sosuki, me and Digi Yon, Digi Yongor and Dele Chisuiracha, Bayapura some dia. The Shengi and them. She handy na milico to dele tendigi to it, Yahore Samata, Konzuki, you, Nikawa Saba de Yahore some died, the Rangi digi to you, Lada Mukevala Chisuiramada, Di Tebu, and the Lada Muko one, Lada Miko one top near, Dendela Dion Chisuira, Shenji, and the Lada Muko one to Yukevala Chisuira Cheada, Shenji, and the Deniki thing. Top Delia Dion de la Chisuira Cheba said, Odus Niga Murwadinale.
Furthermore, one should rejoice with delight in the causes that we ourselves have accumulated and whose results we are experiencing in this life, this attainment of a precious human rebirth. Moreover, we should result in the ongoing causes that we are accumulating that will result in future precious human rebirths. So therefore, in relation to ourselves, we rejoice both in causes that have been and are being accumulated, as well as their results. And so too with others. We should rejoice with delight in the causes that others are accumulating, virtuous, wholesome causes that will lead to good rebirths and happy experiences, as well as rejoice in those who are now enjoying rebirth in the higher realms as opposed to in the lower realms. And therefore, we rejoice in both the causes that others have and are accumulating, as well as in the results that they may be experiencing.
Rangi Gavala Chisuiran Chevada, Rangi Tin, Ludin, that digging Yoa de la Kisuiran Chevaina, and Chisuiran Digi Garchawasene, and the Rangi, and the Jigem, Sosorana, and the Yanja Kiesa Tuvia, and Yamen Chelia, and the Ninto, Semshul Masona, Chertoyada, Rangi and Jipenga Jore, Sambege, Denigi, Sem Mashumbaje, Ninto Kiada, Yang Geshe Thubten and the Zunjul Masona, Dumbala Sona, Dunyer Cherkia, the Zunju Chertoya, and Pingore, I think Pingorada.
So therefore, the rejoicing here is fourfold in relation to cause and effect in terms of oneself and others. Now, the purpose of this rejoicing is to have a definite and profound impact on one's own mind in terms of generating a deep courage or strength. So when you recognize that what we have experienced, what we have attained, this result, has come about independent on causes we have accumulated, and we recognize other causes we are accumulating, this gives us courage, it gives us strength of mind to continue to strive to accumulate ever more wholesome, virtuous causes. So this is a key outcome of rejoicing, is that it helps with our determination, our joyous perseverance. Then in relation to rejoicing in the good qualities of others, this helps to counteract our own afflictions such as jealousy, as competitiveness, as looking down on them, maybe arrogance. So these are key benefits of rejoicing in the good qualities and the endeavors of others, both in terms of the causes they're accumulating, the results they have achieved. It it serves to weaken our jealousy, our competitiveness, our arrogance in relation to others.
Bendigo Sosorangi, La Chesira, some Davina, the Dusinangi, Chaz Gumzeno, some of the Gumze Mambu, some Dadi Jebache, Gumze Mambu, some died, Chesira, some of the Shuk Cherada, Yahaji, Nubarich Masuna, Cherry on Chicago, then Gumzera, that the next some Sharat Amaduna Haji, Jesosura, Sosugi, and then the Mason. Dine Jimaho de Dine, Jesuracia de Ungo Marwa, Cesadine Zanet, Sosugi, Adanga Shing Medanga, Medanga, Chikorisha Sempiki, Semlia, Dutusine, and Yohagi, Yanga Yorwa, Dine, Zadinigi, and the Kabla Sosugi, Gumze Samda, Jevache, Duchin Samdai, and Gumze Tonga, or that is also the Yakuchun Shangadi, Peawisha Sampikita, Dusni Kewanga Migi Delena, Kewaya Wasasha Sada, and Benanga Ducine. Then Sedelina, so me, Ludia, Delia, and the chick, Dini, me, the union had to be a watchonsha, and begin some of Jungurua, Jesuira, Yakure, and some Ligua.
Just as with in the other meditations that are presented, here too, utilize reasons. Don't merely recite a formula, but utilize reasons, because then the impact on one's mind is that much stronger. Because what one, amongst the potential faults that one wants to overcome, or one can overcome through rejoicing, is the expression such as, I cannot do that, it is beyond me. Whereas if one has used reasons and looked at things that one has achieved and what those causes were, and these causes could be either causes we can recall, or by looking at a result, we can imagine what the causes would have been. We recognize that actually we have a vast potential, a potential that is not nearly as limited or restricted as we may otherwise believe. Because what we want to try and recognize is truly how remarkable our opportunity is, and all that can be achieved within a precious human rebirth. And rejoicing helps us to recognize or see more clearly just what we can actually achieve.
Jig Dundri Ida said the Tongo Mada, the Jig Pesina Shea, the Kangayoba, the Jig Hauko, Denege. The Dundro, sometimes the Dundro was on the Tonshin Packet, Dunga, Katse Yovati, Nazu, Tonshin Parava, Dundrolia, and the Jig. That Dundro Manchava, the Jiggy Jiglia, Soyata, Jiggy Jiglia, Kangateada, Jiggy, Jig Sosuki, Nena, Rochuna, Tablanka, made you get Jiggy Menjuji, made you get the Negida, the Semjan. Takanga, we debating on Tungorva, the day sometimes the same Dundro given the Nekanga. I milk the Nikanga, the let Yomo the bear, Yakuchudanga Miki, Yakushu, Sembe, the Nena, such a Menjuchi, Tablamdu, Kanga Karna Sosugi, and Tablam Yobans, the Niki Tindi, Bear Yakuchusha, Sembe meet in the Yakuresha, Miki, and Bear Yakuresha said. Susugi meet in the Anajim. Chikiluna Zeki, Digi Yoyada, and Kamyan Yoba Sosugeda, Sayatuya, they do in Digi Yoyat, sometime the Tibia, which Shas and Big Dushin, some daddy, Susuki Kawala, Shengi, Dundugi Kawa, some dad, Dunga, some da Sosugi, Lutin de Yakuresha. Just not Sosugi Lutin Deliang, it did the top of the Tin Dele Sosugi, Nilerachi, Karina, Sosugi, Kanga Sea, Lerachi to do, Sosu Digiduya, Lerale to do, Tishan, Pempache, and Drutu, just not Sosugi, Lutin Delia, Sosugi, Kiwijawa, Karichibina, Robjonchia, Kawachia, Karchiva, and Yamnache to Gomja, Chetuagi, to do just a tin the bear Oresha, and big. The nigger do in the Gimson sometime, Rangulitin the Pemas, Kichimbo, Zachimbo, Resha, and big. Some logic down do that. Rangulitia, Lutin Topat, just a tindelia, Susuke, Sayatoya, Yapota, that didn't get Tiki, Dush someday, Yaporesha, and do Gimson sometime. Just a douche in the sometime do. He Lutin Delia, Tin Yapotu Delia, Shenla Pandoja, Rangi, George, and Yamnaji, the Nikitin Yaporesha, some do, the Yahudi Bijita, Dangi Yahuji. 야가들의 배시 땅이 대등이 냠len지 투야기 젠레 팸부투여 류딘디 배시 땅에 샘비에 삼로데 아직 삼사바치리기로 하셔야 지 반도체야게당 게슈 투야 되게다 배시 여바디 배시 야고 땅에 샘비에 삼로실리기로 와 제사데 네게 삼게 야래 개발 용구로 와 게슈 냠len지 야라
So, for example, we all have a precious human rebirth. We know this, we've heard it many times, but are we really striving to achieve our potential? Have we even recognized what incredible potential we all can achieve? So here we can, in the context of rejoicing, we can compare ourselves or the situation we have achieved to that of other beings. We can perhaps set aside unseen beings, such as spirits and hell beings, who we can't observe and we only can know through the texts. But we can compare ourselves to, say, animals. So when we compare ourselves to animals, what are they primarily involved in? Well, seeking something to eat and trying not to be eaten themselves. And beyond that consumes most of their time and mental energy. Moreover, whatever problems they encounter, they can largely only endure those problems. They have very limited capacity to resolve their problems. They lack the intellectual capacity to think of solutions and they lack physical capacity to solve their problems. Whereas, as a human being, we are incredibly different from that. We don't have to spend most of our lives just seeking out food or trying to protect ourselves from being killed and eaten by someone else. Rather, in conjunction with others, look at what human beings have achieved. And from seeing what human beings have achieved over the ages, we can recognize how remarkable a human rebirth is and the potential that comes with the intelligence and skills of a human being. We see there, just on that very general level of human beings, how incredibly different we are from animals. And then it's important to look from the religious perspective, the Buddhist perspective, in that as a human being, I can accumulate so much merit. An animal really struggles to accumulate merit, to have that kind of motivation. Whereas for ourselves, if I think about, for example, of when I'm working in harmony with others, working cooperatively with others, how much more can be achieved. And this is a feature of human beings. Moreover, as a human being, I can sincerely generate a motivation to work for others, even if it's just a small group, but I can actually even accumulate a motivation to work for all others. And this is something that is just beyond an animal. So thinking in this and many other ways, this is how we utilize reasons to rejoice in what we have achieved and the causes that led to it. And the outcome that we are looking to develop is not to take this incredible opportunity for granted, but to recognize how truly fortunate we are. What a precious situation this is.
Andushina samda, that the negi, that any dendelia mi copa, that sosara samda, sosugiranaki, mi litin top denelia on the chip. Asong Dungale Tarchi Tiki Yoa de Pe, Masa Yapore, Sampe Samdane, that in it, Yoa de mi Ludin Toyada, mi Dendelia, and mi Diki Yaponoya Radi, Master Dungale Tarchi Tiki to Yoa de Chica. That you got Jawanga Magi, Chica, Ya, and Chikindel, mi Ludin Toyagi, Ju, Sutim Soyadang, said Dendelia, and mi Ludin Dendelia, launch Joyagi, Diki to Yagi. Yoyageda, Jimbatawala Sobata, the Nigger Servocomia, and the Mili Tobar Show Civic, Molam, Jimamiba, Samjawala Sobat, the Nigger Zumbigi, Gava Tisulate in the Juare, Chesade, Gavanga Magi, Megansa, the Nick Gavadu, the Gavati, Beya, Junsha, Sambigi, that is do some daddy, you Gavala Chisira, Beya, Junsha, Sambigi, Gavai Chisira, and the Nigi Sosorang, Sedilia. Sosoran Kejo, Chick, Nature Dumbata, the Niki Gawa, 진비 냠는 저 되네 개와 냠는 저저 어다디 개와 치마다 된 사람이 고와 된 야고 토야다 된 될이야 디기도요 유디 사고 여랑하나 사고 디배하고 중샤 선배다 개왕아메기다 디류된다 된 될이야 디기도요 유 개왕아메기 라는 디기 즉 개와도요데 개와디 배하고 중샤 선배기 지 야고 중샤 선배 삼다만 개왕아메기 개와들이 지수이라 다 소소라랑에 체델야 안치 소소기 개조 강조 배야고 중샤스 그래서 니 제부디 개와 치마 지글하다미 고마 돼야다 난 체디나신 땐디 몽베기 땐델야 안디기 주요 유사고 배야고 인 선배야고 중샤 선배기 즉 야고 중샤 선배기도 삼다वे나 개왕아메기 개와주베 개와라 지수이라 체디게랑 장이 개와주바들 개와들 지수이라 자고로 두 삼단 지수이라 차 고미야디 야고레샤 삼야디 두진의 금제 삼다 다디디 디기 주와데 밀루토와다 디기 주와데 개왕아메 개와 사파라 땐 주와데 디테고레 지난 개와데 야고 중샤스베 지수이라 자 다데딩아 저기 lunga nyechudim chudim soya den jimbenyam 개와 강사바 딜레 띠네 개와 치말레 띠 야고도 사람이 고마 띠 톡톡야 띠 딜레 디기 중에 규 배하고 이야 선백 야고 중샤 선백은 다 개와 지수이라 제야데 도신의 개와 지수이라 삼다야디다 이제 개와 지수이라 제 봐서지 랑기 개와다 개와를 지수이라 제가 자기로와
So when one rejoices in one's own condition, one's own situation, here recognize that all that we are enjoying in this life has come about in dependence on causes that we ourselves created in lives previous to this. So we recognize that being born in the high realms, this came about in dependence on guarding our ethics well, having a mind restrained from the afflictions. So this is how we manage to be reborn as a human being, which means we have imprints that we accumulated causes, we're now experiencing that result, which means we've done this before we can continue and to be ethical and to strive to develop ethics even more. And likewise, the material abundance in our society and what we have, this has come about in dependence on causes we have accumulated. So we can recognize that those causes are causes of generosity. So therefore we can take that, firstly rejoice in what we have done in lives previous to this, and take then that as motivation to strengthen our resolve, to develop a more generous outlook, an outlook where we sincerely want to give of ourselves. And thirdly, where our senses have been complete in this life, this is part of the ripening result of patience. So therefore we can recognize that in past lives, we have accumulated the causes of patience, and in this life we're experiencing those results. So again, we recognize this practice of patience is not a stranger to us. We have excelled at it, and we are now experiencing the results of it. So from this, we firstly rejoice in what has been done. We secondly take confidence that these practices are not beyond us. We can do so. And thirdly, we use this to strengthen our resolve, to apply ourselves to the practice of patience, a mind that stays undisturbed in the face of adversity. And fourthly, that we are here, that we have a delight in virtue that has drawn us back to the Dharma, drawn us, and a mind that we again take pleasure in doing virtue. We recognize that this too has come from causes, namely joyous perseverance. So again, we use this to firstly rejoice in what we ourselves have done in lives previous to this, and secondly, we take confidence, therefore, that we can, through intentionally generating joyous perseverance, we can create new, further causes, and seeing that this is not beyond us, and committing, thirdly, to do so evermore. And then finally, that this is not just a human rebirth, it is a precious human rebirth. We recognize that in lives previous to this, we gave prayers to have a rebirth where we meet the Dharma, recognize its great importance, and apply ourselves. So again, we rejoice in what we've done. we see that we've done this before, we can do it again, and then thirdly, we commit to doing so. So this is how one rejoices skillfully, so as to achieve the result of generating a mind that takes delight in virtue, and one will strive ever more to do so.
유개와 사여봐 안된데라 되네 탈비오 고방 토여봐 탐제 kimyo 고방 톱투 유차사 투여봐 현리에 판도 제반의 판도 지투여봐 뉴버드니 쉬여봐데 삼단데 삼단데 키취가지 지도 삼단에 야가지 야고 하고요도 어다딩이 리딘데 빼고 중샤 선배데 지수이랑 그 가와 숙체게 책으로 와 도체는 삼단에도 되니기 숙체 삼단에도 디규 개왕아마디 규하고 사샤 선배기다 개왕아메 강사들에 지금 미야고 제샤 선배 지수라자다 개와들에 기수이라 자야돼 삼다데 딜레디고로 봐 나도 전에 내내 지수이라 제비게 삼노디기 안는 소소 다딩이 냠는 데네 야고 데네 무디지 냠는 야고 지긴 선배게 삼로 전주도 숙체요야 냠는 제야 되니를 좀 숙체야리야 직제 안에 양 가리용고로서는 데네기 냠는 제라바디 수제베 datun gewe 신연 자리야 최슈디 tin 퇴어디 빼야고래샤 데네기 람든 지gen gewe 신연다 상계되기 빼 지야고래 왕아들에 판도 쉬우지 깨진 지 람든 야고 쉬우 제도 선배게 데네 라마당 아니 상계리야 안지게 깨진 지수 전제 아니 대발하고리 계획이 어두시네 삼로지 용고로 봐 제가 데네에서다 아주 제도 이런 제얘기 균생가래서네 제수 이런 삼다바이네 넬라테네 랑기 개와 제게 삼로디야 숙철 줘야 안에 랑기 개와 제바제 개외 냠내지게 람 템바보 땡켄 남아다 근데 지게 디야 타르도야 직주변에 디 냠내지게 라마디 라마 안에 가 주게 번루 줍된 라소바다 되도시네 타르 안에 사이기 손셰베 람 나셔베 그든 첨부르셔 선배게다 디네게 두치는 야 안내지게 상계다 전주선바 탐젤리야 안내지 대바지야다 대수게 깨진리야 제수 일하지야게 삼라딜리 두고로 두치는 아주 제수 일하지 오야서 돼 김전로지 되네로 와다
Rejoicing in this way, using reasons, means that our rejoicing will be sincere. And moreover, when one rejoices in this way, recognizing at what we have done in past lives and what we are doing in this life, and therefore recognizing what we are capable of, we can build on that and recognize that by striving to achieve the greater goals in the Dharma, those of liberation and enlightenment, these are entirely possible for us. They are not something beyond our capacity. They're not something beyond our reach. What is required is just to strengthen my habituation to those causes that will lead to that result. That's all that's required, and that's not beyond me. So in the same way, as I have been able to accumulate the causes that have led to the results of this excellent rebirth, so too do I have the capacity to accumulate causes that will lead to liberation and even enlightenment. It's not beyond any of us. Recognizing that too leads to rejoicing in our incredible capacity that we have as human beings. So here we're rejoicing in these three parts. What has been done in lives previous to this, what has been done in this life, and then using that as the motivation for the third part, what we can do now going forward. And here we're lifting our recognition of our capacity beyond creating causes for just for future good rebirths, but to actually creating causes for liberation and enlightenment. And then an additional level that I encourage you to put in with your rejoicing is rejoice in your incredible teachers, as well as the entire lineage of great Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. These beings who are guiding you in this life and lives previous to this, that have led us to create the causes whose results we are enjoying now, and who continue through this lineage of remarkable beings to guide us in our development of the very causes that will lead to our own liberation and enlightenment. So thereby also rejoice in the kindness and guidance and inspiration that we receive from our teachers, the great Bodhisattvas and Buddhas too. And the purpose of this entire process of rejoicing is so that we do not take what we have done for granted, and we also utilizing that, we come to recognize what we are capable of. And then secondly, the part I've just added in addition, is that we also come to recognize the roles that the holy beings are playing in our lives and have played in our lives previous to this. So therefore, we come to recognize what we have achieved and what we are capable of, as well as recognize the role that our teachers play in our lives. And this then serves as further reasons for rejoicing.
Ngasung dungale tharjin dunro chikineta dene kanga yor den yongko warda dele tharje mi ludin thode pe awrwa sambege dene dunga nyoma ludin thode pe akures de mi ludin dele khonzuge kanga se digi duya kanga chiki mi digi nyoa yobade digi nyoa yode pe awre sambe chesu iracha ndu samda da khono mi ludin thoya da mi ludin dele an digi chige nyoa dia yu gyawangama 지게 그런 게 리덴디기 다시 그 밀리 토야기 유야고 사르와 유야고 사네 개와주야 빼야 그래도 와서 제산디 텐텔이야 안디기 주게 밀리덴텔이야 디기 녀야게 유개와 사바데 빼야 그래도 산베게다 데니기 지게 그 리덴나 대와 디기 녀야래 지수 일하셔야다 디녀야 유 안에 개와 ngani 그런 지게 디기 개와 사바데 지수 일하지 도시데 다 데니기 된 리덴텔이야 디 코롱의 된 차바자 된델이야 지 코롱의 디기 주야 시한이야 판도제 된 차바자의 외대래 중앙의 빼고래 삼백의 삼다제 어두시 삼다이다 현기 개와다 개비 되고 미 리데나 디기델이야 지수이라 자거와.
And in relation to rejoicing in others, here too we should use reasons, and those reasons are the same as we use for ourselves. So we rejoice in others that have attained a human rebirth and are not languishing in the lower realms. So therefore they are at least enjoying a respite from the intense suffering of the lower realms. So this rejoicing we can apply to all the humans that we know, that we see, that we can think of. Because this is the case with all of them, that in lives previous to this, they accumulated the wholesome virtuous causes whose results they are experiencing in this very life. So therefore we recognize and rejoice in those causes that they have accumulated in past lives and whose results, so secondly we rejoice in the results that they have attained in this life or they are experiencing in this life, that of a human rebirth.
제사다 현기 류디엔다 현기 류개와치베 개와들레 지수 일하체도 약보래 삼백에 제도 아니 곧 진안주기 미디 약보래 삼백에 미디리아 잡결제에게 되어요 와다 잡결제야 미디 지키도 저런 약보래에 로고체에서 잡결제서로 저런 디제네 약보도스네 잡결제로 외절루간들이 보면 잡결제는 외절루고로 와 저라디 보면지 디나시 지상 그런 게 리디에다 그런 게 개어주에 약보래 삼백에 델이야 잡결제백이 제기 근데 거기 개와다 리디 된 디용한테라 그 디기용은 용용한테 약보래 삼백이나 델야 하는 저기 약불에 사바는 델야 안에 모든 차고 델야 잡교치하고 홀리고 삼 지리고 그 제수 일한 제도 안 콜야 약불에 삼여도 안 소수기 뉴비 요 토바는 콜야 이제 로봇체게 어가네 그 약불에 대장이 컨줄야 판도베 자와 카르스나 로봇체 인사비게 삼로 중고로와 되네 삼다에도 안 소수기 소수야 셴야 게위 자와 주비엘이야 판도가 가래 주투기네 다지 뇌다 마다 아니 귀 뭐에다 귀비 토네 배리 토네 지 판도 주긴 셈비게 판도 제게 되발해야 돼 되네 셴리야 팬비게 자와 주비에게 소설야 고합자다 되네게 니교로와 제가 되네게 판도 제야다 되네게 무슨 제투만 매바네 어다 되네게 약보래샤 되네게 약보용한테 셴sem장 탐질이야 라야기니 비준 지긴디 된다래야 안 소설하는 게 안지게 계절 주야다 판도야 주게 어 주긴 선배가 삼로도 시네 대신에 팬비 삼바다 셴리야 안지게 로체에게 삼바티레 돈예티 슈체리고와 되네 연자다 주게 산지 산지고 토발라 셴리야 팬비 저와 셴도 판도 주제 안지게 누구고 봐자 안디 디다 튕견 주어와 제가 셴지 개와다 뉴텐리아 지수이라 제바이나 안 지수이라 사바 개와 슈직기 임바제 개와디 톱기 제수이랑 제가 디 슈겐기 셴리아 팬베자오 두두게 삼로테 슈기레 팬베자오 두두게 삼바 디즈기 셴리아 소수류가 이숨유관에 팬바강 두두 중요도 셴리아 팬바다 라레야 니 셴리아 팬베주게 개와사야 돼야지 용거로와 디네자다 셴지 개와라 제수이랑 제거봐 제사다 디 도초 셴리아 차도 제야다 셴리아 통주다 셴리아 뉘베 삼바디게 파가용으로와 야보에서 야보 주나 삼배는 꼴신 뉴비 삼바리기 말와 아니 차도 삼바리기 말와
Rejoicing in others is really very beneficial to do. Rejoicing both in the causes that led the causes of virtue that they have accumulated, as well as the results of that virtue that they are experiencing in this life. And it's important because of the impact it has on one's own mind. When one is rejoicing sincerely in others, a feeling of connection with them will grow. A feeling of warmth or closeness with them will grow. And from that, we will want to help them. We'll want to support them in their ongoing endeavors of virtue. In fact, it will lead us to, as we rejoice ever more in their good qualities, it will lead us to seek out opportunities where we can be help to others, where we can support them. And that in turn aids our own spiritual development through our own accumulation of virtue. And moreover, through rejoicing in the quality of others and feeling ever closer towards them, warmer towards them, this will strengthen our determination to become a bodhisattva, so that we can really help them in ways of great meaning. So therefore, by rejoicing in the qualities of others and all that they have achieved, we'll look to, through the resulting sense of closeness and connection, we'll look for ways that we can help them whether physically, through our speech, or at the very least, merely through mentally wanting to support them. Moreover, there's the further benefit that because of this emotional connection towards them, afflictions towards them will be weakened. Afflictions such as any expression of negative thought towards them, harmful intent, or jealousy, competitiveness, arrogance towards them, all of such afflictions towards them will be weakened by our rejoicing in their good qualities and the resulting closeness that we'll feel towards them.
Onda dostine Jesuira samdade, da raje nikale Jesuira samdade ke dostine sungorwa. Dine zada yang chik dine ke samde ke chimbura shiridwa. Da garsene danga Gabriela mi su tu su na danga sangye mai bejela ni gyunyi chaje yungore yenden chaje yungore. 제자도 소소기 균이 차대 소소랑 삼담나 소소 균이 차랑 삼담 되네 되네 소소야 배 징하데 강아시티네샤 나레 로버치게 민도 나 교레샤 나 지부레샤 나 미디니 견 통고레 선배 삼다되면 되네스도 디자냐 다되네 되는 예마기 미 소설에 뇌베기 여디게 파테 아니 진예마게 소설에 노래지게 돼 되네 아직 두두 삼두르데 된바 되네 이목차야 돼 되네 곧 양아치 물이오 되네게 삼노 강아 레베네 남상 가르 삼동어선 다 두스테 다지 지수이나 삼다이래 오다가 tiktendelé mi ludéré 다지게 밀야 상계만베 차이절라 미 수이네 강아 여여바레 강아 여여바마다 디기에 용거래 강아 용거래 강아 치sul 마서 상 자잘이야 지게 변조 첨보래 차이냐다 첨보래 사다 지 bombo 치모서다 강아 빠도메 요래 제자디 잠다는 아 지강아 주요래 강아 용거래 이나 강아 여여바나 나랑 루딘디 빼 야고 인스 당에 미르된 탑살 된델이야 소소기 개회 자와 주변에 제에도 소소가 강하세다 디기주야 소소 이웃다에나 참견 줘야베나 차상 제에도 리된 빼고래 선비게 다된 소소기 리된 약고래 선비게 다냐와도 둔조하다 둔조 삼단다 시호징에 약고시우래 아선비게 삼다다 다 소소기 지게 소소기 개회 자와이나 갈랑아도 개 삼노타에 개와 두고래 디멘비게 샬야도 로버치야다 레게 토네나다 류가 가리 토네 샬야 팸바갈 간삼지 로버치 두고래 소소기 제외 뒤에서 지거디 야고로 왔어 세상 소소기 빼야고래 앵이디데저 야고로 왔어 삼다제 네 되네게 소소기 연된 차디 그 삼다 아니데 소소 연된 차디 소소리 야가지리야 젠더 맞제바제 소소를 교하다 점리나려야 제 미가제 제 사회의 제 동에메 바 강아치데 빼지 강아 유에되겐 되네기 안지게 미기 안데 녀죄다다 시에나다 되네게 남다 칼 마투다 되네갈 되베 제 되네 강아데 되네 삼다데 앞에 오리야 선배게 두신 삼다는 소소야 안에 보보기야다 소소를 닝도블리고 되네게 삼다데 소소를 보보다 소소 닝도블리베나 소 이무딜링 말에 제가 말해 봐서 두신 삼다는 소소기다 소소기 셈relösö와다 소소리아 지기 디기 두고야디 두스는 삼다에 던데 두고 그러데 제가 두시에 제가 저기 지다는 저기 지다 담배나라 기부랑게 맞이나 누구 미 땅그래서 기부세도 소소라랑 기부 맞으면은 미 누구냐면 내가 지지오래 디지오래서는 안에 결혼제 지금은 이 지금은 시간 망고용 그래서 그러다 제가 미 소소 기부세에 구대변 기부셔라라고 말해서 그럼 이제 가브리엘은 결혼 내가 지지지지제 디제다서 내가 뭐 그래서 난 가브리엘은 어디 결혼 디지는 지금은 결혼 노래 지기도 와서 두스는 교회를 간시 됐어 제가 미 안에 지금 두스구대에 말서 소소라랑 삼다지 소소 relleje de 기부다 소소라 해서 디다가 담배나 시워라 기부랑게 소소랑에 맞으면 미 누구 땅그리다 강아 제기다 시워 디나시 데 녀마 강아 중요단 진요 강아디게 삼단은 둘둘마다 팬도 가요만 녀마 지게 차차래고 야게 소교 다 가야 말 제선 차차로 삼단마다 하지 당하는 주기 소식이 연딩에 초대 삼다도 삼다에는 소소리아 뽑아기야다 어떤이 디제동에 디제소 디야고래다 너누지긴세비 무드전리기야다 소식이 개회냠래지야 아니 지 도스냠래지야 곰야다 디네지 도스제 삼다에 도스네 제베이네 아니 소식이 닝도블야다 소소라 뽑아려야 되네 아니 소식이 교부시제 샤셈비기 안지 강하다 이목디 마야래디 차바시 야고용으로디 된데리다디 도스네 삼당고고로 디 제수 이라디게 다데데 랑이 개와래 랑이 디기랑 랑이 개와래 제수 이라디게 제사 이무기엘이야 근데 님보라 차기도 하디 삼다베 나죠
I really want to encourage you to engage every day in this practice of rejoicing both in relation to oneself as well as to others. This really is important to do. In particular, if you recognize that your mind has a tendency to be critical, either critical of oneself and or critical of others. if that is the case, then rejoicing is of particular importance, as it is too if one has a tendency to feel depressed or to feel a lack of mental capacity or a lack of capacity, then rejoicing too is of particular importance. And even if that isn't the case, if one doesn't have a tendency towards criticism of oneself or of others, or if one doesn't tend to lack mental strength or fall into depression, nevertheless, rejoicing is of great importance. So when we rejoice in terms of our own situation, here we reflect, as mentioned, on all that we have that is good and worthy of rejoicing in, which has also all come about in dependence on causes that we have created. So when we think like that, utilizing reasons, as mentioned earlier, it will give us a great sense of confidence in what we can do. It will also give us a recognition of our skills and our capacity, and an appreciation also of the general environment in which we live. Because there's so much that's good that we take for granted. There's so much that we have that is good in our life that we just accept as ordinary. Whereas when we compare to how others live their lives, the very ordinary situation, or what they consider their lived daily experience, our situation is so much better. And in this way, we can recognize that what we have really is quite remarkable, and that has all come about in dependence on causes that have been accumulated. Therefore, don't take that for granted. And secondly, if I could create the causes for this, then I can do so again, and we generate a strength of mind. So this is important to do, because other humans have attained a rebirth as a human being, but their lived experiences are very different from our own. So we do not live in danger for our lives. We do not live with great impoverishment or where we struggle to feed ourselves and our loved ones. And this is the lived experience of so many. So recognize all that we have achieved, these causes that we have created in the past and whose results we are now enjoying. So this is important to do. These two general results that follow from rejoicing in our own situation. One, not to take for granted our situation, nor to take for granted our capacity. And secondly, from that, a strength of mind, a determination, a resolve, based in reality of what we actually can achieve. And then in terms of others, so in relation to oneself, this serves then also to counter feelings of depression, feelings of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, it is beyond me. Because all those types of ways of thinking are not based in reality. They are based on exaggerating perceived faults. They are not a balanced view of who we are and who we have the capacity to be. Then following from that is when the criticism isn't directed towards oneself, but when the criticism is directed outwards. By rejoicing in the qualities of others, we deal with this tendency to focus on faults of others. When we focus on perceived faults of others, we exaggerate faults that they may well have. But we see that person through the lens or that restricted lens, solely of their faults, not seeing them for who they are. So when our mind is criticizing others, and this is so easy to do, particularly if we think of the field of politics, or we think of those who have some authority, especially when over ourselves or those we care for, it's very easy to focus on decisions they take that we don't agree with, and see them solely through that lens. This then, when we think in this way, serves to separate from others, separate ourselves from others, And that is contrary to the Bodhisattva ideal, the ideal we hold ourselves to. So when we rejoice in others, when we recognize the good qualities that they have, and even if it's people we don't know, we can see the results that they are experiencing. We know the good qualities that they have to have created those causes that have led to the results that they have achieved, that they are living in this life. That we can definitely rejoice in. So in this way, when we think of the good qualities of others, and we rejoice in the good qualities of others, we're bearing in mind not just recalling good qualities, but the rejoicing, which is a mind of taking delight, it's a mind of pleasure in good qualities of others. We feel closer to them, warmer towards them. So that then serves to make us want to support them, want to be of benefit to them in any way we can. We'll seek out ways that we can help them, directly or indirectly. And when we meet them, we'll praise them, encourage them, wanting to do better. And we'll start to let go of this very strange and mistaken way of thinking, which is to be surprised at the faults of others. When in reality, every being, even bodhisattvas, every being who's not a Buddha, has faults. That's why they are not a Buddha. So that when they think or act or talk in a manner that is not entirely correct, it's not surprising. They are not Buddhas. So this is how through rejoicing, we even develop our wisdom and start to relate to ourselves as well as others in a more realistic manner. And the result of this is towards others, a growing closeness and warmth, and towards ourselves, a deeper confidence and conviction in all that we can achieve.
지사 소소랑게 삼론노를 짠짠짠 소소가 강한 체지 소소가 주고 지사디 소소게 강한 세야지 소소게 삼로 야보다지 두신 삼단에 강하세 두그리에서야지 소소게 삼로 야보마다 시삼 두자자 짠 다리변 소소 강한 홍에 소소게 주고 해서야지 송고로 와다네.
There's a sutra quotation from the Buddha where he says something along the lines of, we are our own protector, we are also our own enemy. And the meaning of this is how we experience ourselves as well as others is just dependent on how we think. We can therefore experience the same thing in very different ways. So we can be our own protector by taking good care of our mind, and we can thereby dispel our own worst enemy, which is our own afflictions. So everywhere we go, everything we do is accompanied with our own mind. Therefore, how we experience the world, ourselves as well as others, is entirely in our own hands. So by training in the way that the Buddha guides, we can radically, quickly transform ourselves.
that 지체직마도 좀 와서데 네 조명이 가르치고라서네 아주 삼나다야다 디 내된디 하고야게 지조로 지치네 디체시게 디엔세데 그 지체줘야디 뉴뉴마도 조금도 와.
So whilst we've only covered one of the four verses on rejoicing tonight, the essence of it really is this, is that our own mind is our own responsibility. But not only that, we have the capacity to radically transform our own mind. We just need to recognize this. So then thank you. We can conclude there for tonight. But if you have some questions, then please feel free to ask.